I am very happy to take some questions. I understand you'd be interested in maybe some musings on the past year and some thoughts on the upcoming year to come. I have officially reached, I guess, the halfway point here in my term as mayor, and I think we have accomplished an awful lot in the first 2 years. Pretty much exactly what we said we would. As I look back on the last 2 years, I think the first year was really all about recovery and sort of stopping the free fall that the city had been in and getting the city back on path. I was asked at the end of that first year, as I would look ahead to 2015, what was 2015 going to be all about? And I said, I hope at the end of 2015 we have a cleaner, greener, and brighter city. If you go back, you'll remember about this time that's what I said. And I do think we have a cleaner, greener, and brighter city, and I think that there have been significant achievements on those fronts over the course of the past year. If you look at the budget that was recently adopted, the transformation in neighborhood services, the increase in capacity of city staff, as well as investment in what we need to do, the new trash cans, the new equipment, the city is cleaning up its act. All of our neighborhoods are getting cleaner. We're building capacity. It's really been extremely successful. If you look at the LED project that is underway, there is no doubt that the city is brightening up. I have received an incredible number of positive comments from the public that really appreciate the new lights. They've been going up really in every neighborhood. If anything, the number one concern is when are my lights going to be changed or be fixed. And the city is brightening up, and it is greener because of this LED conversion, and we're going to be saving a lot of money. So those were, I think, initial goals of my campaign. They were things that we talked about when I ran for office, as well as becoming a more approachable and a city which communicates better, our 311 system and everything else that we established there. But now, I think at the halfway point, we can start to maybe dream a bit bigger. And as I thought about what to say when I came in here, as I look ahead to 2016, I've come up with three even bolder terms for you. I want to have a safer, more self-determined, and growing city for 2016, and we can talk about what each of those mean. But I would say while we have made great progress with regard to crime as a whole, we have not been able to stem the epidemic of gun violence. That is going to be a repeated theme as we move forward into the new year. We set aside $250,000 in money to pay for overtime for our officers. We want them out on the streets. This is an issue that came up with regards to the NRA Outdoors show. I said I'd much rather have the officers in our neighborhoods than at a show, and doing that in a way that makes our community safer. We're going to continue our public engagement forums like the youth forum that we had last night, which is about having a dialogue. One consistent theme has been that we do have a much better relationship between the community and the police than maybe other cities do around the nation, and we need to build on that, and we need to make Harrisburg safer. So if you want my number one goal for 2016, it's to have a safer city. And I said self-determined for a variety of reasons, because I think that we're at that point now, that tipping point, where what next year is going to be about, both in terms of the amendments to the Strong Plan and the launch of the Comprehensive Plan, is about Harrisburg seizing its destiny, charting its own course, and basically coming up with a plan for self-determination and self-sufficiency. We need to exit Act 47. I won't be content until the city does exit from Act 47. It's still going to be a multi-year process, but the amended Strong Plan needs to provide that strategy. It will include home rule, as I've alluded to before. It will include taxes such as the LST, which has been controversial. But essentially, it must be the city charting its own way, independently and sustainable for the future. The comprehensive plan is all about the city self-determining its future and listening to the public. That'll get launched in the spring. It will be the centerpiece of our economic development efforts, such as we have the funding. Impact Harrisburg will be launched. We'll be ready. And all of that is in the context of the third thing I said, which is growing, which is that I think 2016 is the year that we can really begin to see what I hope will be significant economic development progress, growth both in terms of population and jobs. How will that happen? Well, I think we're poised to have our LRTA finally passed by the new school board here early in the new year. I think the tide is shifting. People are feeling that the city is finally not only seizing its own destiny, but economically stable, and it's time to really invest in the future of the city. So as we reach this turning point, this moment, I think it is time now to seize our destiny, to grow, and to focus fundamentally on safety. Got lots of other thoughts, but let's open it up for questions. And if you want to talk about the past, we can do that for a bit, or you want to talk about looking ahead for the new year, I am open.
In terms of making the city safer, I mean, it's been 1 week and we've already had 2 homicides. Was this a goal that you had already had in mind before the year started, or is it in the last week become even more important to you?
It's something which I think the whole country is really focused on. I think the president has done an admirable job of really leading the conversation in this direction. I certainly support all of his efforts. I went back from the youth town hall to watch his town hall last night and was incredibly inspired by all he had to say. The question is, we may not be able to do everything. We can't stop every crime, but we need to do everything that we can. And specifically, we need to limit the accessibility of illegal guns. And that's part of the reason we're taking the strong stand against the NRA and against the outdoor show, but it's also part of a sort of continued effort to reach the youth of our city and to hopefully provide them with better mentors and role models and activities so that they can turn away from the violence that is really sort of tearing us all apart. It's been a concern always, but I think it's reached a tipping point. It's also reached a point in the public conversation where people are demanding action and change, and we want to lead. We want Harrisburg to be a leader in that.
You said that people are starting to look to invest in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that they are still wanting to do that when they see all the violence happening here?
Well, I put safer as the number one thing because I do think that has to be the foundation. I think we have achieved economic stability and a certain level of calm competency in running affairs. But you're right. If people are going to invest in Harrisburg, they want the city to be fundamentally safe. I think it is undeniably true that the crime in the whole has gone down in the city over the past year, but this specific homicide rate and gun violence is where we're focused. I think you'll also hopefully see some policy directions in the new year that are still under consideration. I really want to see what we can do as a city to from a policy standpoint to try and make it safer.
How do you?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Speaking of what you can do, I know you said policies and building relationships, the youth town hall series, but what in particular? I know there was some talk about a hotline. Is there an activity that you would like to achieve in 2016 that you think would lead directly towards helping prevent gun violence?
Yep. Well, we need to constantly engage in dialogue and conversation. We've developed a lot of partnerships. I think one of the themes last night was that the youth of our city and everyone really need to have their own they need to seize their own destinies as well. They need to have that level of self-determination, and they're going to need to look for mentors. The mentors exist, the programming exists, the opportunities exist. You hear this again and again. The question is, how do we connect the public to those opportunities? And the city can act as sort of connector in chief and can basically lead the conversation. But that's pretty much what we need to do.
So the hotline, is that something, I mean, because these are kind of objectives that you're stating, but like an activity like is a hotline, anonymous hotline, do you think that would be something that would be feasible to include in your 311 system to help people report crimes? Is that something that you could see in 2016?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, people obviously can already report crimes, but to the extent, I think the chief talked about the desire to make it easier for someone to report a handgun. Part of that is realizing, as was discussed last night, that that's not snitching. That's being a good citizen, a good neighbor, a good friend, a good mentor. But anything that we can do to make it easier for people to communicate with the police. I'm going to continue to push for the return of school resource officers to the school district, other efforts to see that positive mentorship develop over time. One of the nice themes of the Youth Summit was just how much respect there was among our Harrisburg students for the police department, and anything we can do to help sort of continue to grow that and foster that, I think, would be really good.
This may be jumping off of what Portia just asked, but based off of what you did, what the administration did in 2015, what changes in 2016 to ensure that the homicide rate goes down, to ensure better relations? What specifically has to happen?
Well, we're gonna put more police on the streets, and we're gonna do it through overtime as much as we can. That's one of the major changes that's happening. That overtime is going to pay for additional foot patrols. We're going to hire a few more officers, but we can only bring them on as quickly as we can. We did get a COPS grant for 5 more for next year. And we're going to be committed to continuing to build a positive relationship between the police and the community. And we're going to try and focus on some issues and lend our support to national initiatives such as the Obama administration's initiatives to curb gun violence, because we want to be a part of that type of change on all different levels.
You mentioned the $250,000 for the police overtime. Is that the number that you're anticipating using, or is that 2015's number, and that number is going to go up?
That's a number that we've sort of set aside from our CDBG budget to help pay for this. And now with the end of the budget impasse perhaps in sight on the state government, we also have a major grant application before the state for the Mulder Square area, which could be could really be huge from a public safety standpoint as well. And we'd love to see that funded.
You mentioned tax abatement. I'm just wondering, why do you feel confident that the school board's going to act on that now?
Because there's definitely a majority of support for it among the new school board members. And I think they are planning to bring it up for a vote, and we strongly support it. And I think as long as we get it out there before the sort of spring building, or the spring thaw and building season, I think we'll be fine. It'd be nice to get a program in place, get that all done by say February.
Mayor, you listed
Yeah.
your accomplishments during the years of 2014 and 2015.
Yeah.
Aside from crime, crime is something that's always going to be out there. Homicide is always going to be out there. What do you think is your biggest obstacle, or maybe the top problem, or I guess a gate that you can't get past? Is it going to be the new reorganization council with Wanda Williams as president? Is it the county commissioners, or is it, again, you're saying you have a better relationship with now the school board coming on, but what do you think the biggest obstacle is? I
think we've got an excellent relationship with the school board. I think you saw that last night. I actually think there are no insurmountable obstacles in our way now as a city. I think we're moving. I think we have to focus on these issues, and we have to move towards self-determination. I mean, we're going to have to basically work with DCED to craft an exit strategy for Act 47. And that's going to take a lot of work, but it can be done, and I think we're all on the same page for it. But I think if we weren't taking such an active role, I'm not sure that program has a great track record of success, or at least of municipalities exiting successfully from Act 47. So I think that's an issue, that's an aspect where we're going to have to really push and maybe fight a little bit in order to get a really good working strategy. I think I see success all around, but I do think that we're going to need to focus very strongly as a community on this recent rash of gun violence, especially.
Well, back to the question that Roxbury brought up about the city council. So you had basically asked for a different council president and didn't get that.
Well, nobody wanted to be president. So, I mean, I think that
Is
we
that,
have.
Is that quite right? Is that nobody wanted it, or is it that?
Well,
nobody
nobody wanted to challenge the current council president, and the current council president wanted to be president. I think that's all that happened. I think you've got three terrific new young voices, all of whom are going to be a part of that conversation, and none of whom wanted to lead the council at this stage, and that's appropriate. I think they're going to need time to sort of find their footing and get involved in the political scene. But yeah, I think we'll work really well with the new council, and you'll see a lot of progress in the new year.
You're not concerned at all about maybe that it's not quite the new start you wanted with council?
I would have preferred different leadership on council, but nobody wanted to seize that leadership or to challenge the current president. So that's really not my call. That's their call. I think we've got good new voices, and I think we can still accomplish a lot working together as a city.
And our council is going to reopen the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what do you think the issues are with that? Is it more the local service tax? Is it?
I don't think there are any issues with the budget, specifically in terms of what was passed or proposed. I think there is a larger conceptual issue with regard to the amendments to the Strong Plan, which do include the LST, and basically include a baseline that is going to be established with the budget for 2016 that is going to lead us into 2017 and 2018. I think you're going to see a series of hearings that will start in January that are really going to more focus on the amendments to the Strong Plan than sort of specific amendments to the budget. There might be a few specific amendments to the budget, but the real question is, where are we going to be in a couple of years?
So you've emphasized a few times this self-determination thing. I guess I'm just trying to figure out if you could make that a little more specific. I mean, Act 47, you're saying more self-determination, but we're not ready to be out of it, even on a multiple years basis. Like, what are some areas in city government where you think you're going to move from a place where we're not currently self-determining, we'll be more self-determining? I mean, what are you talking about?
So look at the comp plan, for example. That was an exercise in self-determination. That's basically been a year-long process in which public input has led to city residents saying this is what we want to see, rather than outside consultants or individual elected officials or the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's been about the public saying these are our priorities, and I think we've done a good job of incorporating input over the course of the year to get that. I think when you look at the Strong Plan amendments, you're going to see the push for home rule and the conversation surrounding that, which are another great opportunity for self-determination. I think that will lead to the city being able to exit from Act 47. I think you could see the LST petition, which the city made on its own as an effort at self-determination. I think you can see the city working to close certain nuisance businesses and innovatively doing that with its own board as an effort at self-determination. I think I could go on and on, but I think the city is basically running its own affairs and doing it in a way which I think is going to serve as an example for other municipalities throughout the Commonwealth.
I guess I see other areas where you maybe have been kind of stymied in that effort. Like City Island, for example, you kind of tried to dictate terms to the vendors there. It seems like that really didn't go anywhere, or didn't go as...
I don't think that's... So, What do you mean?
Well, I
Exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
have you been able to renegotiate new permits with those vendors?
We're the largest one being the senators. We've got some pretty big news coming up with that, which is one of the things that we asked the senators to do was to come up with a plan to utilize that stadium for more than just baseball. And we'll be having an announcement soon about some other activities that can occur within the stadium. So I think that's been very successful. The other vendors are all relatively modest and small. We are in the midst of changes at the Carriage House, and I think that's gone fairly well. The vendors themselves really need to have a degree of self-determination in the sense that if they band together and they work more towards collective marketing efforts, that will benefit everybody.
I mean, I guess. Sorry, Christine. I guess Civil War Museum I see in a similar light.
Okay.
You try to wrest control of that a bit and sort of assert the city's rights to its property, and again, didn't happen this year. You didn't kind of get what you wanted. Is that going to happen this year or in 2016?
It'll happen eventually because the Civil War Museum, the way it's currently arranged, in which it doesn't contribute anything in the way of rent to the city, isn't sustainable. It's not a sustainable model for them. It's not a sustainable model for the city. I wish they would have already recognized it, but trust me, they will eventually recognize it, even if that requires legal intervention on our part. But the goal is to have rent paid to the city, which gives the city some benefit back for the millions and millions of dollars that it's put into that museum.
I guess what I'm driving
Sure.
at. Sorry, I guess what I'm driving at here is that you not that it's necessarily a bad reflection on the year, but I think at some point, these outside bodies, businesses with permits, whatever, they start to look at you and you go, okay, you're past your halfway point. Now it's a waiting game, and we can outlast you. The Civil War Museum Board, they've been there a while. They think maybe we can outlast you. So is the clock ticking for you? Are you, is there any urgency to the stuff that Papenfuse wants to get done in the time, whether it's going to be a second term or in the remaining part of this term, or are they going to outlast you? Are they gonna wait?
I think we'll be able to solve the issue at the Civil War Museum. It's not as pressing a concern as public safety or as sort of growing the tax base or self-determination, the comp plan, the strong plan amendments, but it's there, and we will eventually solve that. I'm very confident. They will not outlast me.
Mayor, I'm sorry, just to shift the topics back to gun violence. That's my story today, just to get some more objective reaction from you.
Yeah.
Just looking at the rash of violence and violence happening, shootings happening consecutively, how big of a challenge do you think this is going to be to try to stop the violence or help prevent violence in 2016?
I think it's a very big challenge, and I think that we have great leadership in the police department, which is going to do everything it can to try and make a difference. And I will do what I can to facilitate the conversations, make the connections between the agencies and the groups and the individuals. People like Dave Botero, who was very much lauded last night by the youth, are going to do what he and other organizations can, and we're gonna all work at it, and we're going to work at it as hard as we can. And we're going to try and draw attention to some of these other issues and root causes, whether it be guns and education or economic opportunity. And that's what we can do. And we can continue to talk about it, and I think you will see a safer city. Mark my words. When we're back here next year, hold me to it, safer, more self-determined, and growing city. Yeah.
Mayor, the issue of parking is obviously trivial when compared to gun violence and lives lost, but ask a lot of businesses here on 2nd Street even, they'll tell you it's one of their biggest issues as a business is the parking situation. What can, if anything, be done about lowering rates in 2016?
I think you saw the city achieving some rate decreases that nobody thought was possible last year. I think you're going to continue to see the city fight for its residences and businesses and do everything we can to improve the parking system in the year to come. And that's going to be another example of self-determination. We're not just going to sit back and say, We have to accept this. We're gonna work to improve it, and we're gonna make sure that the city gets the money that it was promised with regard to parking revenue and the strong plan, because it is my opinion that we would not have transferred that asset. We would not have had a strong plan at all were it not for the fact that we were promised a steady revenue stream which hasn't yet materialized in the parking. So yes, I think that's going to be a continuing conversation over the course of the year, and I would not underestimate the city's ability to change the dynamic of that conversation.
Do you anticipate some of those rates then going down?
I don't know. I think that I'm not sure that's the number one issue with the parking system at the moment. The number one issue with the parking system really, there are ways that we can address business concerns. I've been saying this from the beginning. I think you'll see some initiatives, including a new initiative with the Improvement District in the downtown to help make it easier and less expensive for people to park. That's something that we're talking about. You'll see some residential initiatives, but I think that the real issue with the parking is that we're not getting millions of dollars that we counted on in the original strong plan formulation to help balance the books. So as we go forward and we amend things moving forward, how are we going to make up the difference? That's really the question.
Are the happy hour rates and the 4 hours free on Saturday still in effect?
Good question. Yeah, apparently so, but I have no because they are. But I have had no confirmation from John Gass or the parking system as to how long they continue. So right now, we originally negotiated that they would be in effect through the end of the year, and it was a successful experiment. The city didn't have to spend anything. We'd like to see that continued. All signs point to that continuing, but I don't think we have a clear sense of when that's going to stop, let's put it that way. But the rates are still currently in effect. If you go to a meter between 5 and 7, it's still $2, not $3.
I have a question about, you talked about communication between police and residents and wanting to build on that.
Mhm.
As it stands, how are residents supposed to relay information about children with guns or problems other than calling like 311 or 911? Or if they call 311, do they get addressed in a timely fashion? Because we've heard complaints about, at least in the lobby, people coming in and standing and not being able to talk to anyone, and people not knowing what number to call and how to reach somebody.
Yeah. Well, they do get addressed in a timely manner if people will put a complaint through the 301 system. There is a ticketing system. It is accountable. We do monitor response time and satisfaction rate, and it's a great vehicle for doing that. I think we can do more to make it easier for people to communicate with the police department. Another conversation we've been having is how can we make it easier for citizens to register complaints or other types of concerns about the police department itself. I think that should be easier to do that online. I think it should be easier to do it in ways which don't require you necessarily to walk into an office and go through all that rigmarole. So sure, that's something that we'll definitely look to improve in the new year.
The coordinator's quarterly report, the most recent one for the end of 2015, they've continued to kind of urge the city to fill that business administrator role, to like a kind of chief of staff role. Do you intend to do that this year?
Well, it's not in the budget, and don't think we can afford it.
But they made an offer to help fund it.
I said, show me the money. They've made a lot of offers to help fund things, and they haven't done it. They made that offer last year. I asked them for the money. We would have hired a business administrator, I think, if they would have actually come forward with the money. They made offers to IT for funding and other things that they said that they had. It hasn't happened. Honestly, it has not happened. So they can say they have all the money in the world to give the city. We haven't gotten a dime. Although that's not entirely true. I take that back. I mean, they did pay for the sanitation consultant who has been working with the city at our request, and who I think has been worth every penny and has done a really great job in helping me and us develop this neighborhood services concept. So that was a request made of them, and they did do that. But
You're
if they
the position in principle.
Not opposed in principle, merely opposed in terms of how we're going to pay for it and how we're going to make that sustainable. The other thing is that they want to offer, if they want to say you need to pay somebody $150,000 and we're going to give you $20,000 for a year, that's not really a sustainable plan for how to pay for the business administrator. I think We'd need a multi-year commitment, and it would have to be substantial. We brought on our community and economic development director with a 3-year commitment with a full payment for the first year and half payments for the second 2 years. I think something like that could work.
It's sort of a related question, but one thing that we would hear a lot in 2015, or actually really since you took office, about different things why they were taking a while, or or were people feeling kind of stretched to the limit, was this phrase lack of capacity, and a big point of emphasis you had for the budget coming in this year was that you right-sized the government. That now the tax level is at the right level, revenues are going to be at the right level. We can actually
not quite there yet, but yes,
that's what you're saying. I mean,
that's
right. For residents who have had tax hike upon tax hike and are now paying what they're paying, I mean, at the end of 2016, are we going to hear from city departments again, we still got lack of capacity?
Well, to some extent, you could always make a case for a certain lack of capacity, but I think the largest structural lack of capacity was within public works. That's where you just didn't have enough people to fill the potholes or mow the grass or pick up the trash. As we move forward, I think that we can address capacity needs within a sort of sustainable budget framework, sort of shifting one thing to another thing. If you're asking, are we going to need another tax increase, I would say no. I think the LST, and I would also say there aren't any other avenues really available short of the real estate increase. If there were to be other types of things like a drink tax or something that would be available to the city, then I wouldn't object to that, but
that didn't work out too well for Colorado.
right. But that's not even an option on the table. So really, I'm not going to raise real estate taxes, and so we're going to have to live within the capacity that's established. And actually, if you look at the strong plan amendments, that's why it was so important to build capacity this year, because when we go back to the court, we're going to be using the 2016 budget as the baseline moving forward. And unless you established a realistic baseline, it wasn't going to be a successful plan.
I have some legal questions, if that's okay. Solicitor for the Harrisburg Redevelopment Authority, Stuart Magdal, is he still in that position?
I requested his resignation, and he resigned. He is, however, continuing to serve in his capacity as solicitor until replaced.
And so you're in an interview process now?
I believe they are advertising for a new solicitor.
Okay.
And they're also advertising for a new solicitor for the land bank. So if anybody would like to help us spread the word, please do.
Solicitor for the Downtown Improvement District was or is Bruce Foreman. Is that still?
I would certainly like to see him resign, but that's going to be up to the Downtown Improvement District.
But you're still in it now. They've been granted a 2-year extension?
Yes.
Okay, so you still have a negotiating opportunity with the DIG. Is that something that you could put on the table and say, hey guys?
It's already on the table.
Okay.
They know my opinion that I don't think Bruce Foreman is fit to be a solicitor, let alone their solicitor. That's one of the one of the issues that I'd certainly like to see them change in the upcoming years. But the Improvement District's been working very well with us. And as you see, there was no problem with the 2-year extension. They paid for our activities on New Year's Eve, and we appreciate that very much. It was I thought a really good celebration, and really the relationship has never been better with the Improvement District.
And I was told that they did have a pretty sizable cash reserve on hand. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't know.
Okay, I heard it was close to, and I don't. It's only rumors at this point because there couldn't be any documentation. Almost $1 million.
I would doubt that.
Okay. Questions on then, just two more quick. Senators baseball and Civil War Museum. Senators baseball, Paul talked about the coordinated plan, did bring up that there's a shortage of what monies are coming to the city. First off, that it doesn't meet the debt service payments, I think.
That's right.
On that. But then there was another issue of Senators baseball withholding some funds additionally. What is that?
Yeah, it's a difficult issue, and this is the sort of thing that the coordinator points to, and that we already know in the sort of status reports, and we're really focused on solving. The crux of the matter is that the senator's permit doesn't provide enough revenue to cover the senator's bonds, and that means not only the senator's permit, but also all taxes and all parking revenue and everything that comes related to the senators, especially when you add on top of that the continuing certain maintenance and capital improvement obligations for the
I
stadium.
think that was the main.
That's right.
Why was that written to a contract?
So we have two. Well, that we never, I never would have approved the senator's permit as it was approved, but it's been approved. So the question is, do we look to somehow challenge that permit and risk losing the senators, or do we work with the senators to try and bring in additional revenue? And my strategy would be work with the senators to program that stadium for a lot of the dates in which there's no baseball, in an effort to bring in more revenue, which would benefit them and us. It would be a profit-sharing type of arrangement, like when people park for the senators. It's split 50-50 between the senators and the city. And that's the way to close that gap. And it's about a $200,000 gap.
So your goal would be just to be self-sustaining, so to speak, in that.
I don't think, yes. Yeah, I think it is an economic development initiative that does not need to make money for the city, but because of the city's financial circumstances, we can't afford to have a hole.
And with the new ownership of, I think Mark Butler is now the majority owner, has that been a positive?
Very positive. We've met several times. He's very committed to this. As I say, I think we're going to have an announcement in the near future about additional programming for the stadium, and I think that's the way to go.
And then just with the Civil War, you did bring up about the possibility of some kind of legal issue with them. Is that over the contract extension of the contract that Reed signed towards the end of his tenure?
There are a variety of issues associated with the museum. The fundamental issue there, once again, is that financially it doesn't work for the city. There's just millions of dollars of assets tied up in the museum, and no return specifically in the way of rent from the museum to the city. So I remain open and have been open to various rent proposals. I've tried to push for that. Paul is correct. It hasn't been enough of a priority over the first two years to really push any harder than I have with everything else going on. But it will be resolved eventually, and you will eventually see.
That's what you're
Yes,
saying.
if they take the position that they can't pay rent, that is unsustainable and that won't work, and that will essentially drive them out of business. If they come up with a rent plan, I think the city would certainly like to see that as the solution.
I have it's kind of a two-parter. They're kind of related. So it's like a bigger picture one.
Mm-hmm.
2 years in office, looking, it's your first political office. What have you learned? I mean, what did you learn last year about being there? Any regrets? Any lessons?
Sure. I would say the number one thing that I've learned is just how much work this position is, and how much work it necessarily has to be, just because of the circumstances that the city is in, and the realities of the job. It is more than a full-time endeavor, and I don't know what I imagined coming in, but it has sapped every ounce of energy, time, attention, resource that I have, and it's a very exhausting and a very unrelenting job. It is not the sort of thing that you escape even for a moment. So I'm still grappling with that, and what that means, and how I deal with that. There are plenty of specific examples of things that I maybe wish could have gone differently, but I think the trajectory has been very positive for the city and continues to be very positive. Obviously, based on my remarks, I think we're going in the right direction. So I'm very content with where we are, and I think the residents are too.
Anything you think of as a mistake you made?
Well, every day I'm making mistakes. Paul, would you like to nominate some suggestions, and I will. I'm happy to agree with it. No, I think I've gotten the priorities about right, and I think we've been successful in achieving what we need to achieve, and let's see what we can do. I mean, I wish we could have had more economic development and growth for the city sooner than the past 2 years, but I don't think we were ready for it, both from a capacity standpoint, a stabilization standpoint for the city, and everything else. But I think we are now.
The other part, a little more specific, but does it give you any perspective on your predecessors? I mean, you were a pretty outspoken critic of Reed before taking office. Now you've been in this office. Has it shed any light for you on him and his legacy, and how you view how he was when he was running the city?
Yeah, I think that I have a personal empathy and respect for anyone who does this job, and that's definitely there. But I also see the importance of having processes in place, and having independent advisors, and having a sort of internal checks on power that really do exist now, and are incredibly important. So I really have no excuse for how all that got so drastically and horribly out of whack. But I have good relationships, but I can tell you right now, our controller would never sign off on anything that he didn't independently believe was the right thing to do, or was fiscally prudent, or had the proper policies followed to achieve it, and all of that is right in the way it should be, and so I can both have some sort of personal empathy, but also understand procedurally how all the processes had broken down.
How's your relationships with Harrisburg University?
Yeah, fine. I don't think there's been too much of a. Harrisburg University continues to bring young people to the city, which is good, and has assisted the city in certain IT needs and reforms, and I think it's been fine. We haven't had much of a conversation. Remember, there's no connection anymore with the parking authority, or there's no money owed back and forth with Harrisburg University, so we wish them well.
I think you have another appointment.
I do. I have to go discuss anything.
Longer than I thought.
I'll take a final question.
We'll go with you.
Yeah,
What
no, that's
businesses do you plan to target
Kathy,
this year?
driver?
Which businesses? Well, actually, we're in the midst of a comprehensive review. I would say that between economic development and the police department, we're looking at sort of upwards of 20 or so businesses that maybe we will collapse down to a smaller prioritized handful, and then we will first make an effort to see if we can reform those businesses in the new year. And if that doesn't happen, then you may see some non-renewals or revocations as we get sort of towards the end of the year. But I think we've had great success with our new tax appeals board, and I think it's going to pay great dividends for the city. So no specific ones yet. Thank you.